Welcome back.
Welcome back, family, to Hear Us Out. I'm Renee.
I'm Curry.
And once again, as always, thank you so much to our longtime subscribers who have been with us. If you are new here, thank you for finding us. Make sure to hit the subscription so that you can continue to get notifications to Hear Us Out.
Yeah, and thank you. And today we'll be reading and
All
analyzing
right.
Book 7,
Yes.
Chapter 7 of Plato's The
All
Republic.
right.
Over this last month, we have been reading
Mm-hmm.
Plato, a lot of Plato. We've been on Plato's Republic, and in the last episode, we read Book 6,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. And like I said, Book 6 was my favorite chapter so far. It was the one that kind of got away from the world building, if you would, from the world building that Plato's been doing so far, and kind of just tackled the entire idea
Uh-huh.
of philosophy as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
and the role philosophers and philosophy is meant to take in the society, and what it does to people and stuff
Yeah, and
like
I
that.
also thought about if how differently Plato would look had the same, I guess, tools and rules would have been applied to him, especially if, reading the first few books. And then I think it's really book uh, 4 and 5 that really, or was it 3, 4, and 5? That's like that gave us,
Hmm.
I'll say the biggest angst and headache. And I'm like, had those chapters been removed because it didn't fit the particular paradigm or whatever, how differently, and then we move on to book 6, how differently Plato, I think, would even be viewed, more so had, those chapters have been eliminated, just like he talked about, basically censoring and omitting, I guess, different lines of Homer and Hesiod and others.
Mm.
So it's just something that I found particularly interesting because, like I mentioned, I thought that book 6 was sort of refreshing as well to get away from his eugenics programs and all those other
Hmm.
things. So
Yeah.
yes, so here we are.
So here
We're
we
book
are now
7.
in Book 7.
Mm-hmm.
And Book 7 kind of deals with the quintessential Plato anecdote
Mm-hmm.
about the cave.
Right.
That's literally how it starts off.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know anything about Plato,
Right. This is the
if
thing
you
that
know
he's probably
anything
known
about
for, right?
anything about Plato
Uh
and
huh.
his, the metaphysics and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, then you most likely it'll be this
This
particular
book,
anecdote,
right? Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, this so let's get started.
Yeah.
Let's
Let's
jump right
just
in
yeah. Right.
because it literally starts with this particular, I guess he would call it parable, if
Right.
you would.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next then, take the following parable of education and ignorance as a picture of the condition of our nature. Imagine mankind as dwelling in an underground cave with a long entrance open to the light across the whole width of the cave. In this they have been from childhood, with necks and legs fettered, so they have to stay where they are. They cannot move their heads round because of the fetters, and they can only look forward. But light comes to them from the fire burning behind them higher up at a distance. Between the fire and the prisoners is a road above their level, and along it imagine a low wall has been built, as puppet show men have screens in front of their people over which they work their puppets. I see, he said. See then, bearers carrying along this wall all sorts of articles which they hold projecting above the wall, statues of men and other living things made of stone or wood, and all kinds of stuff, some of the bearers speaking and some silent, as you might expect. What a remarkable image, and what remarkable prisoners, just like ourselves, I said. For first of all, tell me this: what do you think such people would have seen of themselves and each other except their shadows, which the fire cast on the opposite wall of the cave? I don't see how they could see anything else, said he, if they were compelled to keep their heads unmoving all their lives. Very well. What of the things being carried along? Would not this be the same? Of course it would. Suppose the prisoners were able to talk together. Don't you think that when they named the shadows which they saw passing, they would believe they were naming things? Necessarily. Then if their prison had an echo from the opposite wall, whenever one of the passing bearers uttered a sound, will they not suppose that the passing shadow must be making the sound? Don't you think so? Indeed I do, he said. If so, said I, such persons will certainly believe that there were no realities except those shadows of handmade things. So it must be, said he. Now consider what their release would be like and their cure from their fetters and their folly. Let us imagine whether it might naturally be something like this. One might be released and compelled suddenly to stand up and turn his neck round, and to walk and look towards the firelight. And all this would hurt him, and he would be too much dazzled to see distinctly those things whose shadows he had seen before. What do you think he would say if someone told him that what he saw before was foolery, but now he saw more rightly, being a bit nearer reality, and turned towards what was a little more real? What if he were shown each of the passing things and compelled by questions to answer what each one was? Don't you think he would be puzzled and believe what he saw before was more true than what was shown to him now? Far more, he said. Then suppose he were compelled to look towards the real light. It would hurt his eyes, and he would escape by turning them away to the things which he was able to look at, and these he would believe to be clearer than what was being shown to him. Just so. Suppose now, said I, that someone should drag him thence by force, up the rough ascent, the steep way up, and never stop until he could drag him out into the light of the sun. Would he not be distressed and furious at being dragged? And when he came into the light, the brilliance would fill his eyes, and he would not be able to see even one of the things now called real. Then he would not, said he, all of a sudden. He would have to get used to it, surely, I think, if he is to see the things above. First, he would most easily look at shadows, after the images of mankind and the rest in water. Lastly, the things themselves. After this, he would find it easier to survey the night by heavens themselves, and all that is in them, gazing at the light of the stars and moon, rather than by day the sun and the sun's light. Of course. Last of all, I suppose the sun, he will look on the sun itself, by itself, in its own place, and see what it is like, not reflections of it in water, or as it appears in some alien setting. Necessarily, said he. And only after all this he might reason about it, how this is he who provides seasons and years, and is set over all there is in the visible region, and he is in a manner the cause of all things which they saw. Yes, it is clear, said he, that after all that he would come to this last. Very good. Let him be reminded of his first habitation, and what was wisdom in that place, and of his fellow prisoners there. Don't you think he would bless himself for the change, and pity them? Yes, indeed. And if there were honors and praises among them, and prizes for the one who saw the passing things most sharply and remembered best which of them used to come before and which after, and which together, and from these was best able to prophesy accordingly what was going to come, do you believe he would set his desire on that and envy those who were honored men or potentates among them? Would he not feel, as Homer says, and heartily desire rather to be serf of some landless man on earth and to endure anything in the world rather than to opine as they did and to live in that way? Yes, indeed. He would rather accept anything than live like that. Then again, just consider, if such a one should go down again and sit on his old seat, would he not get his eyes full of darkness coming in suddenly out of the sun? Very much so. And if he should have to compete with those who had been always prisoners by laying down the law about those shadows while he was blinking before his eyes would settle down, and it would take a good long time to get used to things, wouldn't they all laugh at him and say he had spoiled his eyesight by going up there, and it was not worthwhile so much as to try to go up? And would they not kill anyone who tried to release them and take them up, if they could somehow lay hands on him and kill him? That they would, said he. Then we must apply this image, my dear Glaucon, said I, to all we have been saying. The world of our sight is like the habitation in prison, the firelight there to be the sunlight here. The ascent and the view of the upper world is the rising of the soul into the world of mind. Put it so, and you will not be far from my own surmise, since that is what you want to hear. but God knows if it is really true. At least what appears to me is that in the world of the known, last of all is the idea of the good, and with that told to be seen. And seeing this must be inferred to be the cause of all right and beautiful things for all, which gives birth to light and the king of light in the world of sight. And in the world of mind, herself the queen produces truth and reason, and she must be seen by one who is to act with reason publicly and privately. So yeah, that was the allegory of the cave, and the entire thing kind of rests upon this idea where he's trying to explain over the last book, few books, the end of book 5 and
Yeah,
book
coming
6
into
and stuff
book.
like that. He's trying to explain the utility of the philosopher and why is it that a lot of people cannot recognize that utility. And he, like we've just read, likens it to people stuck in a cave who
That's
can
right.
only who have all they have ever known of reality is shadows and echoes, and they assumed that that was reality.
Right.
But then one person was able to free himself from this prison and see reality, right? Even though it didn't all come at once, he was able his sight was able to adjust to this reality. And when he went back to his fellows in the cave
Right.
and tried to take them out of the cave, it was he who was seen as broken, right? Like something must have happened to your eyes up there, because the truth is the shadow and echo, right? And when he tried to he talks about they would kill this man for trying to blind them essentially by trying to take them away from reality, never really knowing that all they have ever seen is shadows and echoes. And he likens it to you know the soul being risen to the world of the mind, and that some people are able to ascertain that new perspective on reality, but those people are seen as useless because the whole of society is in that cave,
Yeah.
and
There is.
all
That's
they
right.
know is shadow and echoes. And when this person comes and tries to
Get them
take them
out.
to the
Right.
to the realer world, right? That person is seen as a villain, as an enemy. They are ostracized. They are vilified, right? And at worst, they are killed. I guess in Socrates, it say,
Right.
for Socrates and stuff like that, they're killed, right? When it is, and according to Plato and Socrates, I guess in this story, it is those people, those ones who have been vilified, those ones who are able to make that journey. It is those people who are best able, who should be best positioned
Right.
to rule,
Rule. That's right.
right? So that was his whole thing. And he continues here talking about how it should be these people, it should be the philosophers, like he has said many a times before. They should be the ones to rule, right? Because he's to him the biggest thing, the worst thing that a philosopher can do, right, is have this new knowledge, this new perspective of the world, and then not share it,
Right.
in a sense,
Right.
not try to
Act upon it.
act upon it or rule from it, right? Like he says, they go to the island of the best, and the worst thing that they can do is stay there,
Right.
right? But even though he talks about in chapter in book 6 about how the world that he's living in, that they're living in, the philosopher, is unable to accommodate for them. And all they end up trying to do is make it through the storm, weather the storm of a reality that cannot accommodate for their perspective, you know, for a society that cannot accommodate for how this person feels and how this person thinks. So all that person ends up being able to do is just weather the storm and
Mhm.
not try to get caught up in the madness,
Mhm.
right? But like it says, it's that person who should be the ruler.
Mhm.
That person is the one that should be the prime mover, should be
Mhm.
positioned at the center of the society, because it's that person that has been able to ascertain,
Mhm.
you know, the true knowledge,
Mhm.
right? And but it's not just any philosopher,
Right.
because philosophy, like he defined before, philosophy and a philosopher is a person who that is able to say
What
what a thing
is
is
and
and
what it
what a thing is
is not.
not,
Mhm.
right? So not just the philodoxers, as he
Mhm.
says, those people whose minds are changeable and who have no definite position
Mhm.
to take. Those people aren't actually
Mhm.
philosophers, right? Those are the people who give philosophy a bad name
Right.
as far as Plato is concerned.
Concern. Right.
No, it's those people that are able to say what a thing is and what a thing is not,
Mhm.
who have been able to take the soul of themselves, the soul that is of right opinion, that just has a sense of rightness, and has been able to uplift that soul into the world of the mind, of reason, right? And has been able to what could you say? Give actual reasons,
Mhm.
right, as to why they are right. Other than just right opinion, they don't have a sense of the rightness. They now have a reason,
Mhm.
right? Those people, those ones should be our rulers, should
Mhm.
be our kings,
Mhm.
because the worst thing that they can do is take this new knowledge that
Right.
they have, take
Mhm.
this new knowledge that they have, and just stay in that
Right.
knowledge and not be able to disseminate that knowledge to the
Mhm.
people as a whole, or be able to rule from that place.
Mhm.
Because, like Plato says, that we're not trying to, we're not prioritizing the happiness of one class over the other. The philosopher is more than happy to stay where they are,
Mhm.
right? But we're trying to prioritize the health and happiness of the society as a whole,
Mhm.
which means even though they may be most happy in their position on the island of the best,
Best.
as he
Right.
calls it, of the
Mhm.
blessed, islands of the blessed. They may be most happy there, but society would suffer. And that's not good. And that's not good for the overall happiness of the society.
Mhm.
So those people, even if it be against their wishes,
Mhm.
those people must be made to rule. And over the entire story so far, ever since he started his,
Yeah.
world building, has been trying to create the proper culture and the proper atmosphere that can allow for the philosopher to rule.
Mhm. But the problem has been and continues to be is that when you are a philosopher, you don't want to rule. You want to share in your knowledge with others. So that means if the philosopher is on the island of bliss,
Mm-hmm.
right? The idea is for him to share his knowledge, her knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
to bring others to the island of best, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is not the philosopher who wants to come from the island of best to come here and to rule you all, and to dictate for you what you should and shouldn't do and those type. That's not what they want to do.
Yeah,
And
because
so that's the problem. It's very problematic,
that we
to
would
set this the way that
think
that
that philosophy,
uh-huh.
at least the way we see it, will make one unfit to be ruled
Mm-hmm.
or be a
A
ruler.
ruler, right.
It kind of invalidates the whole system as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not to be redundant there,
Yeah,
but it
but
does.
it does.
Because the problems,
Right.
the thing that leads a philosopher to question their reality
Mm-hmm.
comes from that place,
Right.
right? And like we've said before, Plato isn't trying to he isn't trying to get rid
Right.
of the system. He's trying to perfect
Perfect
it.
it. Mm-hmm.
He's trying to fix it. Right? So that's why like I say, he understands that to be a ruler, to be a leader, a king, right, entails compromise.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about how that person must love truthfulness,
Mm-hmm.
but also understand
And he may have to lie.
when he needs to lie.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He understands the compromise of the position, but he wants the best person in that position
Mm-hmm.
to make that compromise only when necessary,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not for their own benefit, but for society as a whole, and only when it is most necessary for society. And like we said, does Socrates, does Plato think that any other city,
Mm-hmm.
that any other society was created from a different basis than
Right.
his? I said there's a reason why, our leaders are given so much latitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we understand the position entails compromise.
Mm-hmm.
The position in and of itself is a compromise from us.
Right.
Nobody wants to be ruled.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, in our own mind, we all are, well, we all want to be ruled because we think it allows us to one day become a ruler.
Ruler. Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's right.
That's the perfect system.
Mm-hmm.
And the ruler only lies and cheats and does all those things when it's absolutely necessary. Right? So, but that that's how can I say it? It's a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
It's never just this one thing.
Right.
The compromises just keep coming.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Think about it like how many times has America been in war?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Just think about
every time. Right.
The previous war we were just in,
Mm-hmm.
and all the things we heard about that war,
Mm-hmm.
about the unlawful imprisonment
Mm-hmm.
and torture,
Mm-hmm.
and all the innocent lives caught
Mm-hmm.
up in the middle, right? Guantanamo Bay and all that. And
Mm-hmm.
how many people are willing to say, "Well, it's war.
Mm-hmm.
It's not right," but you make the compromise that is necessary because we've been forced to this point because 9/11,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
All that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so no one's being held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
No one is actually making the worthy compromise.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't that situation where, it's the leader who loves truthfulness
Mm-hmm.
and being honest and all that stuff, doing what's necessary to protect the overall health and happiness of the state as a whole.
No, you're just either with them or
No.
you either with us or you're with the terrorists.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
It's a whole other system that's meant to maintain itself.
That's
and
right.
It's like that. See, that's what you end up creating
Mm-hmm.
when you conflate your ruling body
Mm-hmm.
with the health of your society.
Mm-hmm.
The ruling body existing and in perpetuity
Mm-hmm.
means that your society is healthy.
Right.
So when you conflate your ruler with the health of your society, which means the ruler's happiness
Mm-hmm.
or way of life is the only thing that matters in that continuum. And that's when you get the breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you get the divisions, the cities within cities,
Right.
like Plato talked about before. And you would think that philosophy, when you begin to question why are we at this point
Right.
now,
Mm-hmm.
you look at the system as a whole and say it's because the system is broken.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now a lot of people get to that point. Right? But a lot of people say, okay, now how can we fix it?
And it's basically you're doing the exact
And
same
it's like,
thing. Right.
what we, oh, I'm sorry.
You're doing something either to embolden the system.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking that you're doing something else, but you're just only enhancing it, right? Or you're simply just trying to replace the folk because you just think that they're just not good people, and
Mm-hmm.
if there were better people in charge, then things would be better. And then they fold like lawn chairs as well once they get in, because that's what the system is. And your
Hmm.
philosophers are the ones who are constantly questioning that. And the way the look at how your people are responding. People are always they're constantly rejecting the system. That's why we know that something is wrong. So
Hmm.
that's where all of this tends to get problematic. No one wants to be ruled, but like you said,
But everyone wants to
to
be a
be a
ruler.
ruler. So in order to be a ruler, at some point you have to have
You
been you
compromise.
compromise, and that's what
And
this
you
has been.
think it's
Right,
going to get you to that
somewhere. Mm-hmm.
place, but it doesn't.
That's right.
The rulers remain rulers, and the ruled remain ruled.
Right.
So and it's like so. The next question, at
Mm-hmm.
least from a philosophical standpoint for us, is: can the system be fixed? Can
No,
the
the
system be
system needs
fixed?
to be eradicated. There's no repairing this.
Like, and
You
then
have
like
to do
that.
something else.
That's where all the questions come in. They're
Right.
like, is there something wrong with the system, or is this working as intended?
Oh well, yes. Well, the system is working as intended.
Is this
Yes.
the way it's supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff? And it's
Right.
like, but Plato here is doing a thing that we have seen people do time and time again.
Yes.
We've read multiple stories, even like from Afrocentric point of
Mm-hmm.
views, from Black point of views,
Right.
and all this other stuff about people trying to fix this
This. Mm-hmm.
as if something is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? Plato looked at his world. He saw how people were unhappy,
Mm-hmm.
and all these his cities were crumbling, and war and madness, you know, and he thought about how do we fix this?
Right. We have to perfect
Right? We
the
have to.
war.
We need the best people in
Right.
the best position.
Positions. Mm-hmm.
Right? The people most capable to do a job must be given everything that they need to do
Do that
that
job.
job.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's what we want.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to craft that from cradle
We're
to
gonna, yeah,
grave.
from
Right.
the ground
Up.
up,
We're going to
from even
craft it.
before the ground.
Yes.
We're gonna do everything in our power to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that. Because after the allegory of the cave
Uh
comes
huh.
same old from Plato.
Right.
He begins talking about, okay, now how do we teach the children
Right.
education? What is it? What's the process? He
Mm-hmm.
even there's this whole part. I'm not even
Yeah.
gonna
No,
get into
yeah.
it,
Yeah.
where he talks about what makes a particular idea thought provoking,
Mm-hmm.
and how we need to gear our society that toward that thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I could get into it. It's this whole analogy about defining a thing by its opposite, and how. Uh, no, let me
Taking
just look
things
at it.
completely taken out of the context of what the thing is, and looking at the thing itself, trying to
Hmm.
define the thing itself as if it can be taken out of the context of what the thing is.
Hmm.
That's been the problem. And so I think he uses the story about the fingers,
Yeah.
not understanding that the fingers operate with the hand. And the hand operates with the body. That's why you have the finger. You can't look at the finger in its of itself.
We're explaining a thing
Okay, all
they
right,
don't
all
that
right.
they don't know about. They
Okay, all
haven't
right.
heard
Okay,
of it.
okay, okay, fine.
Like, we didn't want to get in because
Right,
it's
but
like it's. All right, I'm just gonna have you read
let
read
me
it.
put my glasses on.
You want to read it?
You can read it. I mean,
You
I have
don't
no
want you
problem
don't
with you
want.
reading. You can read it. You can read it.
All right.
You can read it. You can
All
read
right.
it. You
Because
can
I
read
did read that whole thing then.
it. You can read it.
All right.
I was ready to rant and read. You can
Yeah.
read
Right.
it.
If you observe, some things which the senses perceive do not invite the intelligence to examine them, because they seem to be judged satisfactorily by the sense. But some altogether urge it to examine them, because the sense appears to produce no sound result. Obviously, you mean, he said, things seen from a distance or in shadow drawing. You have not quite caught my point, I said. Then what do you mean? He asked. I mean by those which do not invite thought, all those which do not pass from one sensation to its opposite at the same time. Those that do I put down as inviting thought. That is, when a sensation shows two opposites equally, whether its impact comes from near or from far. I can explain what I mean more clearly. These are three fingers. We say little finger and second and middle. Just so, said he. Suppose now that I speak of them as seen close by. Just ask yourself this, please. What? Each of them appear to be equally a finger. And in this respect, there is no difference whether the one seen is in the middle or on the outside, whether it is white or black, thick or thin, and so forth. And all these things, so most men is not forced to call on thought and ask, whatever is a finger, or the sight does not signal to it at all that the finger is the opposite of a finger. No, indeed. Then it is not likely that such a case would invite or arouse thought. Not at all likely. Very good. What of their bigness and smallness? Does the sight see these sizes adequately? Does it make no difference to it that one is in the middle or on the outside, thickness or thinness again, and softness or hardness? Does the touch feel these surely enough? So with the other senses, are they not also defective in what they show? Or rather, what happens is this. In the first place, the sensation which is appointed to judge the hard must also be appointed over the soft. And as it goes on feeling, it reports to the soul that the same thing is both hard and soft. Just so. Then, is it not necessary that the soul is puzzled in such cases as to what indeed the sensation signifies to it by hard if it says the same thing as soft? And so with the feeling of light and heavy. What light or heavy means if the sensation declares the heavy light or the light heavy? Really, he said, these explanations are queer for the soul and need examination. It is likely, then, that it is in such cases the soul first calls in calculation and reasoning and tries to examine whether one thing or two things are reported to it each time. Of course, if it appears to be two, then each appears to be distinct from the other and one. Yes. And if each appears to be one and both together two, it will conceive of the two as separate because they are two, or else it would have conceived of one not two if they were inseparable. Quite right. Sight again saw big and small, we say, but as something compounded, not separate. Don't you agree? Yes. But on the other hand, to make this something clear, as in fact big and small, reason was compelled to see it not as compounded, but separate, the opposite of what sight saw. True. So, from some beginning like this, we first think of asking the question, then what, after all, is bigness and smallness? Undoubtedly. And that you know is how we came to call one thing a thing of the mind and the other a thing of sight. Quite right. Then this is what I was trying to say just now when I said that some things provoke thought and some do not. I distinguished as provocative of thought those which bring their opposites with them when they fall upon the senses, and as not awaking the intelligence, all such as do not bring in their opposites. I understand you at last, and I think so too. So
I'm sorry,
that
my face.
whole that
Sorry.
whole thing,
Sorry.
that whole argument,
Uh-huh.
like I said, he was trying to establish what makes a thing
Mm-hmm.
thought provoking
Mm-hmm.
and what makes a thing not thought provoking.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, that's the role of philosopher, what is and what is not. And his whole allegory was of three fingers,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
From your pinky to your middle.
Right.
And he says, and look at these three fingers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your senses in and of themselves don't distinguish these fingers as being anything but fingers,
Mm-hmm.
even though, like, some fingers are smaller and larger
Right.
and thicker and thinner. It doesn't matter. Your senses just see them as fingers,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when you try to distinguish one of these fingers from the other fingers,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you actually try to distinguish those things, you end up rousing the reasoning part of your mind, right? And there are particular things, right, that your sight doesn't distinguish, but your mind does,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because to your sight, a finger is a finger, no matter
Mm-hmm.
which one on your hand there is,
Mm-hmm.
right? But to your intelligence, to your reasoning mind is able to distinguish the smaller one and the bigger one. You're right. It's able to distinguish these things, and there are particular thoughts, particular axioms that entail in and of themselves their opposite. And those things are thought-provoking ideas, or things that provoke your mind beyond your senses.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are the things that we ought to gear our society toward. That's how we ought to teach. That's how we ought to impart our lessons toward trying to, through bringing up ideals that entail their opposite, that are able to distinguish in and of themselves. That's how you bring up, the reasoning mind. That's how you arouse thought. Right, and that's when he goes on to bring up the point of dialectics.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's when a dialectic is two opposing truths that are the truth at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's what he means by bringing up their opposite.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a thing that entails its opposite, in a sense, when you have a thing that coincides with, that is able to distinguish, that thing is a dialectic, as far as Plato, Socrates is concerned. And that should be the bedrock, of their education. He talks about calculation,
Right.
literally simple arithmetic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then he talks about geometry.
Mm-hmm.
Then he talks about the movement of solids.
Right.
Then he talks about
astronomy.
astronomy. And that builds up to dialectics. Right? All of these things are it's the background of what a thought is, or what a truly thought-provoking idea is. Right? And that's why, like I said, we didn't really get into that, because it's a very particular argument, and it's not, but it's not one that there's a certain, what you could say, Plato seems to be missing a thing.
Just say it.
Plato seems to be missing a thing, because it's not like when he thinks about a thing, right? When he's thinking about a thing, it's not like he's wrong, but he's not totally right.
Right.
Is the thing that I'm trying to say. He's not totally right.
Right.
In that you can't recognize a thing in and of itself.
Right.
Because nothing exists in and of itself.
Right.
The fingers on your hand, you can't distinguish the smaller one from the other one without first recognizing what a finger is. And a finger is only a finger as it relates to your hand. Right. Your hand's only a hand as it relates to the body. It's all connected. So to try to understand what one finger is as opposed to all the other fingers, and begin to describe in detail the characteristics of one finger against the other fingers, entails that finger's connection to the whole.
Yeah.
You cannot recognize
the only way that it could be its opposite is if it is its whole. That's how you can't. If you're constantly comparing, or you having, you're going through these lines of thought, the only reason why the finger is bigger is because in comparison to something else. It's always in connection. It's always in context. Even though he's thinking that he's looking at it within itself, he's not. That's the thing. That's the problem here. Is that context is critical to understanding. Even though he thinks that to compartmentalize, to have everything of its own, to stand on its own, that's how you understand it. But the thing is that, like we've already mentioned, I don't know how many times, nothing is standing on its own. The only reason why it's a finger is because it is on a hand. You understand what I'm saying? Like that's it. And so then the hand is, everything works together.
If you're taking it out of that context and trying to see it of itself, then you are no longer describing a finger.
That's right.
You're no longer describing that thing.
Right.
That thing only exists in that context.
Right.
in context, in relationship to the whole thing. If you
Mm-hmm.
take it outside, if you take a thing out of its system,
Mm-hmm.
then you are no longer looking at that thing. That thing is only what it is
Right.
when it is in the system and it is moving in relation with everything else. Right? So
Right.
you do this, if your thought process is to try to pare down to such an extent that you're only looking at that thing and only seeing that one thing, then you're not looking at anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because that one thing is only what it is
In its
in relationship
to
to
everything
everything
else.
else. You can't you cannot reason is not a vacuum.
Right.
Nothing exists in a vacuum.
Education is not a vacuum. None of
None
these
of these
things
things, yes,
operate
so
within
yes, so you
itself.
can't
Right.
pare down these
Mm-hmm.
things thinking that you're getting closer and closer
Mm-hmm.
to what it actually is, when really you're getting further and
And
further
further away.
away from it.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, I told you, as I'm like, I can just draw the line here because I know where this is going. I know what this educate. I know what it's lending itself to. And like you're like, well, you didn't. It's not that okay. Well, I didn't necessarily see it going. Shh, I did because this is what you talked about: supporting and maintaining the city state, all the way down to the numbers. You have war math. I call it. I call it
Mhm.
the soldier
Because
math.
once again, he starts talking
Right.
about, because well, like we talked about with the calculation,
Uh-huh.
geometry, astronomy, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That in every part where he goes in to describe
Mm-hmm.
these things, he first talks about their utility to the general,
That's right.
to the warrior,
Because
right?
it's
As
useful,
as
right?
a calculation, literal
Mm-hmm.
arithmetic. You ought to be able to to
Count tanks
to
and
count your
chariots
soldiers,
and
to know how
stuff,
many
right?
soldiers you have.
Right. Yep.
Geometry, so you can know the movement
Mm-hmm.
of your
Mm-hmm.
soldiers, right? Astronomy, so you can navigate
Right.
your
Mm-hmm.
soldiers, right? All of these things. And he even talk like once again he brings up bringing children to the
Right.
battlefield and even
Yeah.
having them literally see the horrors of war. And he even talks
Taste
about
blood and all this
tasting the
blood,
blood,
right?
right? So they can become acquainted with these things. And it's like, so you think that a warrior culture is going to produce philosophers.
I keep saying, I'm like, when you are lending yourself to a particular frame, everything that you're going to do is going to lend itself to it.
Understand
that's that's
that
what
the
you're doing.
philosopher king, the warrior poet, is not a dialectic.
Correct.
It's a contradiction.
Diction.
These are not two opposing truths existing at the same time.
Right.
They cannot
I
exist at the
exist.
same
Same
time.
time.
For all of the reasons we have discussed before, but it is as simple as this. Rulers don't need philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And philosophy does not make one into a
The ruler.
ruler. Rulers rule. And the
Mm-hmm.
only thing they worry about is maintaining their rule, because their rule is the health of society as a whole.
That's correct.
This isn't some new mandate
Right.
Plato
This is
came up with.
right. This is not a nuance
That's
here.
old
That's
hat.
what. That's what,
That's what
exactly.
all this stuff has been
Right.
since the very
The
beginning.
beginning. Mm-hmm.
Rulers don't need philosophy. Rulers need to rule.
Right.
Period.
And they need to be in the position to make all the rules and laws to maintain that.
That's how you get
That's how.
kings
Right.
from the onset.
Right.
Rulers rule. If they are clever, that's a plus.
Mm-hmm.
But most rulers don't care anything about the nuance
Right.
of life and their relationship to their people and all that good stuff. Rulers rule. That's
Right.
all they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
When you try to make a ruler into a philosopher, you make that person unfit to rule.
Right.
Because at that point, they begin to make sacrifices of their society, of their rulership for their people. And at that point, you are no longer being a ruler.
Mm-hmm.
You are something else
Right.
at that point. And that's why those people end up dead.
Mm-hmm. Basically, right.
Rulers rule.
Right.
And philosophers are not rulers.
Mhm.
Because philosophy does not make one into a ruler.
That's
It
right.
takes one away from that system as
Oh.
a whole.
Correct.
Right? It takes one away from that entire metric as a
Mhm.
whole, like Plato talked about. It takes one away. So these two things are not opposing truths existing at once.
That's right.
They are two
contradictions,
divergent
right.
paths. There is no overlap here.
Mm-hmm.
There's no warrior scholars. You
Right.
are not going to make a scholar, a philosopher, by taking your children onto the battlefield and having them see, the grotesque
Mm-hmm.
horrors of war and tasting blood.
Mm-hmm.
You think that after that you're going to sit down and read from them the specific lines of Hesiod,
Right.
and that's going to be able to offset that? What do you think
Right.
you're going to do that? There is no philosophy at war.
Mm-hmm.
There's winning wars,
That's
period.
it. And you would
There's no
do whatever it
philosophy
takes
in
to win.
ruling.
That's right.
It's ruling,
Mm-hmm.
period. These two things do not coincide. There's
Mm-hmm.
no overlap here. There is none. There is, like we said, there's no safe way to be a lumberjack.
Yep.
It can't be done.
Right.
And there is no philosophical, enlightened way to rule.
Right.
You just rule.
Right. If you are enlightened, if you are the philosopher, if you are educated, okay, because that's the term, then these are the things that you're not going to do. It makes you unfit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We know that's sort of familiar. We've heard Frederick Douglass say, education that makes you unfit
to be a slave,
to be ruled.
Mm-hmm. Like you said,
right?
The moment he learned how to read,
that was a wrap. Right.
He would no longer be a slave.
Right. And he would act on his knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he did.
In spite of himself. He couldn't. You can't help it.
Right. Right. So there is no way that a philosopher, in all of his or his knowledge,
philosophy,
would even step that way. That's not how it goes. And when kings do, become, I guess, philosophers, what do? They're no longer kings.
Mm-hmm. They end up becoming farmers.
Yes, right. So like, I quit. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. So the idea that you can marry the two.
The system is rigged.
Right. That's not.
They preclude one another.
No.
You can't tell a person because that they're meant to simplify reality and question it. That's really what you're right. You're simplifying the whole metric. Your entire thought process is remove the nuance and look at the thing in and of itself. You're overly simplifying a thing.
Mm-hmm. And we keep saying that things are never that lateral. It's never even that linear.
And it's never that simple.
You're talking about human beings here. You're talking about people with feelings and emotions, with their own thought processes. They can draw their own conclusions.
There's no system of wisdom. There's no one way a person gains intelligence. All these things come in their own way to people in a myriad of ways. Mm-hmm. Like wisdom can come from anything.
Right.
Like I've also said before that intelligence is an aesthetic. Intelligence is an aesthetic. It's literally like we talked about because in writing a paper, you don't even have to know what you're talking about.
Right.
But if you know how to present whatever idea it is that you have, if you know how to write it,
you're good to go.
You're good to go.
Right.
You don't even have to know it.
You don't even have to believe it.
Just know how to present it. Just know how to present it. That's what I'm saying. Intelligence is an aesthetic. Mm-hmm. The wisdom that comes from anywhere, and that comes from any walk of life.
Right.
Right.
I mean, you have folk out here. Look, you learn, you live, and you have learned from, like you said, all sorts of people.
So you can't. Like I say, you can't say what is a thought-provoking idea and what is not.
Right. First of all, it's not even up for you.
Yeah. Well, as a philosopher, it is up to you, right?
Right. Because how you're defining it, right?
Who distinguishes.
Right. Because you're dictating, what it is and what it is not. And that within itself is problematic. How you even
because now, before you rule a society, you're ruling a reality.
Mm-hmm. That's what you're trying to do.
But you're not accepting it as it's presenting itself. You're constraining it down to your own beliefs. Mm-hmm. You're not even accepting your gods as they're presented to you.
Right.
You're not accepting music or people.
Math, anything.
As they're presented to you.
Right.
Everything can only be what it is when you take all of the things away from it that you think are superfluous.
Right.
When it is pared down to those things that are most useful to your worldview, that's when it is a thing.
Mm-hmm. That is sick, man. That's sick. That's that Platon. That's when we talk about that Platonic mode, or that Platonic epistemological mode. Here is that everything, it serves its it serves a purpose, not its
Mm-hmm.
purpose. It serves a purpose. If it doesn't serve that particular purpose that you have said that that purpose is supposed to be, then it is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, we should know better than anyone else what that means, how that feels, and how that is
And what it does.
does to a people.
Mm-hmm.
We know this better than anyone else. So the idea that you can turn around and say, okay, well, I am going to do this way, trying to perfect that, or
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna define, but we're gonna do it the right way, or that we're going to be fair in our assessment.
We're
That's
going to make lumberjacking safe.
yes.
What is this?
That's
You can't do it.
that's not how this works.
And it is not that you can't do it. It's that it can't be done.
Right.
It cannot be done.
Right. Like I said, even when Socrates, Plato is saying this, the society in which he is living in, it is not reflective of the things that he is talking about.
Oh, it is absolutely reflective.
Reflect on reflect.
In all the ways he's not intending.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. That. Like I said, the reason why you want the children, going to wars and doing these things is because that's not what's actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You're not bringing your babies to war. You're not, fostering this warrior thought process, whatever it is. You're not doing those things. And you're thinking that if you do these things, that it will perfect your city states. Mm. That it would make things better. That we will be able to war better than anyone else. We will be able to do these things, but that's not how it goes.
It's not how it works. There's no perfecting war. Mm-hmm. There's no doing that the right way.
Right.
And there's no warrior there's no warrior culture that's going to produce a philosopher. It's not.
First of all, the warrior culture is not intended to do that. That's not even the intent of it. The intent is to what?
It's to make
warriors.
And that's all you're going to do.
That's all you ever want to do. Once that warrior decides, if that warrior sits back, and really starts thinking about his reality, right? He starts reading and learning and educating himself. He's going to put down the sword.
They are no longer a warrior.
That's what they're going to do.
Before, like in the Edo period, Japan came after the Sengoku.
Right.
The war ended. Mm-hmm. And that's when
now it's time to talk it right.
That's when Bushido and all that stuff came around. Right. That's when they became poets. Mm-hmm. When the war was over. And all these swords got taken away. Mm-hmm. That was it.
Yes.
That's when they became poets.
Right. Because when you are at war.
When you're at war, there's no need for poetry.
That's right. No time for
poems. No need for philosophy.
Right. Right. None of that. No.
Fight. Win the war.
That's
period.
it.
That's all it is.
That's it. Yeah. You'll bring your children out there then because you don't have enough bodies for this, so somebody has to do it.
Yeah.
Of course, women can be soldiers too. Well, of course. We have a war to fight. You understand me? I like that. Yes. 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 We're going to let African Americans into our ranks, into our military. Because there's a fight that needs to occur, that we need to win. It's all in the service of that. That's what war does. That's what the war culture is. And it's never ending. It's insatiable. It's never satisfied.
And it like peace. It exists in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing.
Peace is its own goal.
Right.
Right? You do a thing for peace because it's peaceful. Mm-hmm. That's the same thing with war. Right. Same thing with ruling. Mm-hmm. It's its own goal. Mm-hmm. It's its own point. And that's why it's so pernicious. Mm-hmm. So virulent.
Right.
because it exists in and of itself. It exists in spite of you.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I don't know how many times we can say this,
Right.
but every time we read another chapter in
Right.
Plato, and this is chapter 7, so we got
A
8,
couple
9,
more.
10,
Yeah. A couple
3 more to go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure we're going to say it again and
Again and
again
again.
in those
And we've
particular
been saying
parts
it
as
before.
well,
We're saying it
is
before.
that you can't do this the right way,
Mm-hmm.
because what we're existing in
It's the result
and
of
what
it.
you're
Right.
existing in,
It's the result.
right, with the thing that Plato is existing in,
Uh-huh.
is not the result of a world going wrong.
Right. This is intentional.
Nothing
That's right.
is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's the optimal process.
Right.
That's the way it's supposed to
go.
work.
Right. This is intentional here. Right.
This is the way it's supposed to go, Plato.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with your society. It's working.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's not failing. It's working. It's too successful.
Yes.
That's the problem.
You know, just as war is intentional, just like your peace is, evil is intentional. It's on purpose. So will the good. That's how this goes. We have to make a choice here, and what it is that we want to do. And if we want to continue in this metric, then we could just keep doing what you're doing.
Plato, like his entire ideal is, it's a thing that we've seen so many times before. Mm-hmm. Like I said, with so many philosophers who ask themselves, how can we do this right? How mm-hmm. can we get this right?
Right.
And his entire philosophical idea, for one, like I said, we find that, just on the reasoning level, mm-hmm. flawed, mm-hmm. right? Because we're a bit more ontological, right? In that we put the process after the thing that processes it. Mm-hmm. Plato's entire ideal is prioritizing the process of knowing, mm-hmm. right? Because that's the core. The mm-hmm. core is the structure, right? It is the process of knowing and understanding what should be known. Mm-hmm. Which is a whole other metric over right. what can be done. He's mm-hmm. trying to create a philosophical basis for saying what things should be. Mm-hmm. What things should be. Mm-hmm. Instead of trying to accommodate for what is.
That's right.
And that whole thing, that mm-hmm. whole failure to launch mm-hmm. there, right, leads to this kind of thought process.
Right, because if you're going in with something that you think, if you're going in with a thought process of what a thing should be, and that thing is constantly operating outside of what you think it should be,
then what that thing is will constantly elude you. You'll never really understand what's happening in front of you.
Well, yeah. And we know the results of a thought process like that.
You'll never be able to truly reach that place where you can say you know what your word is, mm-hmm. because you're not looking even at your word. You're not seeing it.
You're trying to dictate,
for what it
right?
Is.
Exactly.
You're only seeing it for what is not and for what it should be.
Right.
All right. And it's a dangerous thing to believe that you're the one with the answers. Right. That you're the one.
Right. You're trying to dictate reality versus living
in it.
Living in it. And when that thing, like I said, if, as usual, when it doesn't fall the way that you want it to fall, apparently something is wrong here.
If I could tell Plato anything, mm-hmm. it would be there's nothing wrong with wanting to change your world. Mm-hmm. But you can only change what your world is.
Right.
You can't change what it should be.
That's right.
That's a fantasy. That's a dream.
That's the word I used yesterday. Mm-hmm. He's a dreamer.
That's a dream.
Right.
Right? Like we've often said before, like we can't solve for the things that happened to us before. Right. We can solve for what's happening right now. That means we need to have a very, very accurate picture mm-hmm. of the world we're living in as it is now, today.
Right.
And for Plato, he can't accept what his world is at the moment.
That's right. That's
He
right.
can't accept
That's
all
right.
of Homer.
Goodness, right.
He can't accept all of
Hesiod,
philosophy.
right. He can't
He can't
accept
accept
Zeus.
all of
Zeus,
wisdom.
he's right.
He can't
Right.
accept all of these things. It is only when they have been made serviceable to his ideas that he can accept them as worthy of existence.
Useful. Right.
Those
Mm-hmm.
and that type of thought process is very dangerous to
Yes.
have
Mm-hmm.
because, like we said before, the world will change. That's the one
Constant.
constant
Right.
is change, constantly changing. Like I said, the universe is a 8 billion-year old newborn,
Mm-hmm.
and it's constantly finding a new way to be young.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a reality of eternal youth. It's always new.
Mm-hmm.
It's always shifting and moving. And when you try to impose your form onto it, right? Instead of recognizing the form that is
That it
present to
is,
you,
right. That it is.
you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to you're trying to reinvent life, not knowing that it's already being invented.
Mm-hmm. And
It's right there. It's present. It's right
mm-hmm.
in front of you. If you can look at it for what it is, for the way it's presenting itself to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because to say that we exist in what it is even,
Yeah,
it's a whole other
the
conversation.
conversation,
But
right,
if
right.
you can recognize the way it's being presented to you, right? And temper that knowledge in the fact that reason isn't a vacuum.
Right.
You're not by yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? That there is a shared reality that we all exist in.
Mm-hmm.
If you can recognize that and the human elements that makes that world, that moves that
Mm-hmm.
world, then you can get to, trying to change it.
Mm-hmm.
But if all you can see in your world is what it's not,
Right.
right? And what it should be,
Be
if
right.
all you can see is that, then you're never going to get to anything. All you're ever going to do is try to make a dialectic out of a contradiction
Right.
and do your best to make philosopher kings and warrior poets, which cannot be done. So yeah, if you have any questions, you got anything?
No, that's it. I
Yeah,
mean, I just shrugged my shoulder and say
yeah,
we will eventually get a camera so you can see all of our expressions.
yeah. So once again, if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments. And thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you.